and welcome to the Law of Attraction 2.0 Spiritual Straight Talk with GP Walsh and myself, Karen Scarpula. Tonight's guest is Zen Master Genpo Roshi. From his first awakening in 1971, his life has been about waking up to our essential nature, our true self. And for the past 40 years, his purpose and his passion have been to deepen his own clarity and to assist others to awaken and realize their true nature. In 1999, he created the Big Mind process, which has been acclaimed by philosopher Ken Wilber as arguably the most important and original discovery in the last 2 centuries of Buddhism. It is revolutionizing not only the teaching of Zen, but also spiritual practices within and outside both Eastern and Western traditions. It's now spread to every continent and has helped thousands of people from all walks of life and have a genuine sustainable awakening with little or no prior consciousness. His publications include The Eye Never Sleeps, Beyond Sanity and Madness, 24/7 Dharma, The Path of the Human Being, and his newest book, Big Mind, Big Heart, Finding Your Way. Welcome, Zen Master Genpo Roshi.
Oh, thank you.
How was that for an introduction?
It always is a little humbling, but thank you.
I'll add music when we do it for the thing. It'll be a big fanfare.
Well, we're so excited to have you this evening. Before we get started, I'd just like to remind everyone that we'd love to have you call in with your questions this evening. So just press *6 on your phone, and I'll be alerted that you've raised your hand for a question. So, G, I know that you and Genpo know each other very well, and I would love for you to share your story with our listeners.
Well, I really have to jump in here because Genpo is a very important figure in my life. After a lifetime of spiritual pursuits, including the practice of Zen, I got exposed to him at really very early on in the Big Mind process, and I really didn't know much about him before that. But the history of it is interesting. But I really wanted to cut right to the chase here, because in everybody's spiritual life, there's kind of this point where you're bouncing back and forth between being in the world, being out of the world, being divine, being human, being awake, being asleep, being enlightened, being deluded, the absolute and the relative. There's kind of this schism that we're forever trying to resolve, the sense of I'm happy, I'm not happy. Why am I not happy? And and it really can completely and totally absorb you. And even though I've had enormous breakthroughs and enormous insights, there was this piece missing that I just couldn't find anywhere. And it was at the Big Mind event. It was like a half hour before the event was over. And it's been very, very inspiring, and it was very, very interesting. And I maybe get a little bit more into what it was about. But it was a bit Big Mind. Like I said, it was early on when he was doing it, and it was almost to the end of the whole thing, and he was, and Genpo was talking about what he calls the apex, this thing between the absolute and the relative, all of the bouncing back and forth that I had been experienced, and he was talking about the thing that's bouncing back and forth, and I said, wait a minute, stop, what's that?
And were you pointing at the time?
Yeah, well, he was standing at the chart, and he was doing, and my finger was out there going, what's that? And he said to me, if I wanted to mail you a letter, what would I write on the envelope? And I said, Greg, you'd write Greg on the envelope. He says, no, if I wrote that, it wouldn't get to you, would it? And I said, well, no. He said, what'd you write on the envelope? So I said, Greg Walsh. And I started at the address, and all of a sudden, I went, holy shit. And it just clicked. And it was like the entire entire thing just collapsed before my eyes. It was so crystal clear. I literally sunk into my chair. The event was over. Everybody had left the room, and I couldn't move. I was just,
Wow.
I was awake. And what's really fascinating about it is that even though the bliss of the moment, the ecstasy of that whole experience eventually faded and caused me a bit of a struggle for a bit until I began to see through it. At that moment, all of those questions, all of the bouncing back and forth stopped, and it's never come back. And the people characterize me as they nickname me the irreverent sage, right? They think of me as wise. It seems like I always seem to know what the answer is. This is where it came from. It was a direct experience of that source of wisdom. In the Hindu, they call it Prajna Paramita, which means the wisdom that takes you to the other side. It is the mother of all Buddhas. It is represented by the goddess Kanon. It's that place of intuitive knowing where suddenly you simply just know, and it's never left me since. And so I always love to quote the Chinese proverb, when you're drinking of the water, remember the one who dug the well. And Genpo is the man who dug the well for me. So it's always such an honor to be in his presence and get yet again to express my gratitude for what he did for me and share him with all the people who like me.
Well, thank you, GP. I mean, that's very moving story. That's what we would call a real Kensho experience or Satori experience, when it all comes together like that, and then there's no longer that dilemma or that conflict between the two, whether we call it the absolute and the relative, or expansion or contraction, or big mind and small mind, or
big self,
Buddha
little
mind
self,
and ego
yeah,
or self. Yeah.
It all just goes away.
Yeah.
Poof. There's just no conflict anymore. And that has been the single most meaningful event in my life. It was the resolution of a lifetime's worth of searching that finally popped in that moment.
Oh, that's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. It was to me, that opened up the heart of Zen. I just really didn't understand it before that. Because like many people, I was searching for the answer. Go ahead.
Well, that apex, I do call it big heart.
Yes.
Or you could call it the heart of Zen, because that is what it is. It's the prajna manifesting as compassion or as big heart. And that compassion is for all beings. All beings.
Yes.
And that is the apex. Sometimes I refer to the left-hand bottom corner of the triangle as the self, or the limited self, or the confined self, the one that has got boundaries around it. And that self is absolutely necessary and essential in our daily life, but it is so contracted. Mm-hmm. And the right-hand corner of that triangle I refer to as big mind, or Buddha mind, or Buddha, or expanded self, or big self, whatever we want to look at. It's transcendent. And the apex is when those two come together like they did for you in that moment. And that, that is G.P. Walsh.
Yeah. Yes. That was the utter wonder of it. I said, oh my God, it's me. It's this human being. It's this ordinary guy. It was like, that was the staggering part of it. It wasn't this, the great absolute, and then there was this other part that was kind of getting in the way. The two of them were so obviously one. You couldn't have one without the other.
Absolutely. And that's also what we mean by Mu, and at the same time, beyond Mu, the source of Mu, and so forth. The way you were talking about it earlier, too, it reminds me of one of my favorite koans by Dogen Zenji, who lived from 1200 to 1253. he talks about the hazy moon of enlightenment.
Yes.
And that hazy moon, I know we've talked about it, you and I,
Mm-hmm.
but that hazy moon is when you embrace it all. And sometimes it's very clear, and sometimes it's very foggy. sometimes we're clear. Sometimes, we appear to be brilliant and, astute and profound and enlightened and all that. And sometimes we just appear to be like idiots or
rather dense,
and,
yes.
And run by our desires and all this, and we have a tendency to make one superior to the other. We have a tendency to want to be clear and to be enlightened and to be conscious and to be good and to be all of that. And we have another tendency to try to push away or push down or suppress the ego and our arrogance and our pride. And not to say that we shouldn't mature those,
mm-hmm.
that they can't grow, but pushing them down and into the basement is the problem.
Yes.
And it's how do we open ourselves up to all of ourselves, to our whole self, rather than to just parts that we revere and other parts that we shun or we hate about ourselves. How do we really open our hearts to ourselves? Not only to all beings, but how do we open to oneself? Because always it seems like the biggest problem is a kind of self-hatred,
yes.
or feeling inadequate or insufficient or something's imperfect about us. I remember with my own teacher, there was a moment in '86 after my major experience, my Daikenshō experience. I went to see my teacher, and we embraced. We hadn't seen each other in like 6 months. And we just embraced, and the separation just disappeared, just dissolved. And we just became totally at one, in that moment. And I remember what I was struggling with and my doubt that I was going through. It's called kind of great doubt. The doubt I was going through is, well, my teacher's not perfect. He's not happy. He's not a perfect being. And I've done everything I could completely for 15 years, completely submitted my life, surrendered to the Dharma, to the teachings, to him as a teacher, a master. I did all that. I became a successor, and I did everything I was supposed to do to be happy and to live a free, joyous life, and still had my angst. There was still stuff, stuff that made me unhappy. And the moment I went through that great doubt and accepted him, or actually accepted myself completely as I am, imperfections and all. So in other words, my imperfections are perfect as they are, and my perfections are imperfect as they are. I also felt that for him, and it all dropped away, and I could meet him in that place of no meeting where there's no two,
yes.
not two. When I saw him, and it was a really amazing moment.
In Chinese, the symbol for mind and the symbol for heart are the same symbol.
Exactly.
Which is we've made a split between them here. Like there's conceptual mind, and then there's your feeling heart. It's a completely imaginary split, and I find that that whenever I have a truly deep insight or moment of clarity, there's an opening of my heart that goes with it. There's a level of forgiveness and compassion that automatically emerges, and it goes the other way too. Just suddenly, seeing something that touches you, that grabs your heart, or somebody suffering, just that desire to reach out brings clarity as to actually how to do it. It really is amazing to me that this stuff really does lie within us. Since that time, I mean, my whole theme, the entire tenor of everything I've taught has been, you're not broken. Your nervous system is not functioning optimally, but it's not your fault. That you don't have to be afraid of discovering who you are, that you really aren't a weirdo with two heads. That this process of letting yourself, really experiencing yourself as you are, it's only terrifying because you're expecting to find something really bad. And the reality is we never do. Now, it's really hard to convince somebody of that when they've never actually seen it for themselves. It takes a lot. That's where it's nothing but hard. Just nothing but creating an environment where somebody has enough courage to actually go and take a step into that space they haven't wanted to go. And that's really what's so beautiful about the big mind process, because it brings people there without them even knowing it.
Yeah, kind of slips them in.
Kind of slips them in before they have a moment to go, hey, what the hell just happened? Hey, everybody, this is G. I'm not going there. You can tell from what I've been saying on the show, I'm a real big fan of the big mind process and of Genpo Roshi and what the process has done for me in my life. And if you like any of the things I say, that's pretty much where the source of it came. It's what opened up that inner eye of wisdom for me. And I would highly recommend you have the same experience. So I'm urging you to go check out bigmind.org, bigmind.org, where you can find out all about the courses that he offered, the online courses, the video courses, live classes with him as he travels around the whole world giving it. He also has some teachers that are certified for giving Big Mind classes. I highly recommend that you check it out. There's all sorts of videos on YouTube. There's all sorts of ways to find out about it more for yourself. And as you can tell from my enthusiasm for it, it's something that I really recommend you do. If you've had some interest in Zen training before, this, I think, will enhance it in ways that you may not have thought of. And if you've never had any kind of training whatsoever in any kind of this non-dual stuff, it's still going to be valuable to you because it gives you access to all those voices you have inside of your head that you thought were the enemy, but in fact are simply parts of your own nature. Again, bigmind.org with Genpo Roshi. Check it out today. All right, back to the show.
That was really the whole impetus behind the discovery of Big Mind since 1971 in my own first opening. It was to find a way that was not going to bring up a lot of resistance, but a kind of fearless, a way to slip in the awakened state of mind without having a lot of barriers or resistance, and making it kind of, I don't even know what to call it, but where there's no fear there
Yes.
to tighten up, to contract, to kind of just slip it in there before the person even knows it. And I found the magic word was please. May I please talk to or speak to? Because, you mentioned broken.
Yeah.
And one of the discoveries I discovered, I think it was mid-2000s, about 2005. I remember I was at a workshop in Paris, and we were talking to the part of ourself that I call the damaged self, but you can just as well call it the broken self. Mm-hmm. And we were speaking as the broken self, the one that feels broken and damaged, and has been hurt and has his or her story and all that. And I usually allow it to speak first from the part that's not appreciated by the self. I call that the disowned. It's down in the basement. The self doesn't really appreciate you. It tries to hide you from the public, from the world, because you're broken, you're damaged, and it's not very proud of you, and it's in fact quite the contrary. So that's down there, and it affects everything we do.
Yes.
So after I kind of talked to that down in the basement, and I start to bring it up, and I said, well, visualize what it would be like if you were in the penthouse, and you had a view from the top, and you were actually honored and embodied and respected by the self. If the self actually loved you and appreciated you and all that. what that would be like. And they start to visualize that. They say, okay, now let me speak to that one. And that becomes an amazing process, because all of a sudden the brokenness or the damage is not so important anymore.
Right.
It's just there. And then in that particular workshop, I said, okay, if you're the broken self, there must be on the other side of the triangle one who has never been damaged or broken.
Yes.
There must be a self that's undamaged and unbroken. May I speak to that one right now? The moment the persons go, oh my God, I'm undamaged, I'm unbroken.
Wow.
And wow.
Yeah.
Because that self has always been there too,
Yes.
alongside the broken one. And it reminds me of a koan by Great Master Rinzai, where Rinzai was coming from the fields. And I don't know what years this was, probably before 1000 AD. And he was coming from the fields, and his teacher was sitting under a tree in the shade and kind of relaxed and chilled out. And Rinzai's coming out, he's probably in his early 20s, and he's all hot and sweaty. And the teacher says, Obaku says to him, oh, I see you've been hard at it. And Rinzai says to his teacher, yes, but you should know the one who is not hard at it.
Mm.
And that's exactly that.
Yes.
You know, there's one that's working hard, there's one that's sweating, there's one that's trying, there's one that's doing, there's one that's broken, there's one that's having a tough time. But there's always that other one, right next to it.
Just hanging out.
Yes.
That's just hanging out, chilled out,
That's
nirvana,
right.
you know, happy, at peace, unbroken, undamaged. And that one's right there. It's so accessible. That was the word I was looking for, how to make this really accessible,
Right.
you know, to people. It's so accessible. All we have to do is make that shift and ask to speak to that one
Right.
that has never been damaged, never been broken.
Yeah, I'd like to just kind of point out to the folks that when Genpo is talking about that, many of you have heard me refer to that before. We all have these various energies inside of us, and some of them we like, some of them we don't like. And in the Big Mind process, if you're not familiar with it, you literally speak to those various energies directly. It's almost as if they're like other people, but you become them and you speak as them. And the end result is that you really do feel that energy, and there's a release that takes place. It sounds kind of strange when you hear I'm going to talk as this voice, but the reality is there are many, many different energies within all of us. And the whole purpose of genuine spiritual integration is to have full access to all of them and see them all as they are and their usefulness just as they are. They don't have to become something else and become useful and become desirable. They're all part of the functioning of life. And when you really open up to them and let them speak, they integrate. They become a part of you. And now they become, rather than being an energy that's opposing you, they're an energy that's actually supporting you. Did I put that correctly, Genpo?
I think you did beautifully. You know, I want to add something to it. But, you know, when the Buddha attained enlightenment, what he said was that the moment I awakened, simultaneously all sentient beings awakened and all have the same virtue or same wisdom and compassion as the Buddha. And, you know, all Buddhas, we say, are all sentient beings, and all sentient beings are Buddhas. What I noticed along a few years ago was that every voice, you said, every voice is like human. It is. It's almost like every energy or every voice is Dharma.
Mm-hmm.
Because everything that manifests is Dharma. If it manifests, it's Dharma. Unmanifested is Buddha, but it manifests is Dharma. Together, it's Buddha Dharma.
Right.
So each voice is like a sentient being and has the same wisdom and the same virtue, the same compassion, the same understanding that a Buddha has.
Yes.
And that's what we've been finding that's so exciting. When you speak to a voice, it could be whatever voice it is. It could be the coolest voice in the world. When you speak to it and you move it from the basement and you allow it to ascend into the positive, out of the negative place, and up, and become conscious because it has a view and perspective. What you get in touch with is the wisdom and the compassion of every voice.
Yes.
And every voice, therefore, like every being, when it awakens, transcends itself and has the same wisdom and same virtue as the Buddha himself.
Oh, it's wow! That's so beautiful. A way you can really understand that is just consider the human body, which is made up of 100 trillion cells, which is like a really big number. But each one of those cells isn't a machine; it's a living being. All of these energies that live inside of us, that we think of as like, these demons that are pestering us, they are like living beings. They have a purpose. They have a life. They have a Buddha nature. They have a transcendent side to them. They have a life purpose. And all they seek is the same thing everybody else seeks, that freedom to be who they are, to fulfill their particular life purpose. And in a lot of cases, a lot of these energies, their life purpose is serving you.
Exactly. I mean, when we really begin to ask them what is it they want, they all want the same thing that any of us want and any child wants. They want to be appreciated, they want to be loved, they want some attention, they want to have some respect, and eventually, they want to be empowered to do their job.
Yes.
If my job is fear, I don't want to be hindered by you hating me as the voice of fear and trying to get rid of me, and then my job is just tougher. It's just more difficult to kind of protect you from potential harm if you're trying to kill me and annihilate me and go in all these workshops to get rid of me. But if you actually are willing to embrace me, own and embody me as fear, then I actually can serve you better. When you empower me as fear, I become the awakened mind.
Yes.
That's alert, that's attentive, that's watchful, that's mindful, that's present, and I'm just watching all the time for any danger.
Yeah, and it's wise fear. It becomes wise because
very wise,
it doesn't react. It doesn't react to something that isn't really a danger, right?
Exactly.
So it ends.
It's not an immature.
It gets rid of anxiety and the ridiculous anticipating bad things happening in the future, which are all very immature uses of it. It's like it's very quiet. It's monitoring the horizon. If it sees something that really is dangerous, it lets you know.
I started off as a lifeguard just about the time I turned 16 at Huntington Beach, and because I was so young, they stuck me in a beach that didn't have a whole lot of swimmers. And it was a very windy beach, and you had to sit in this tower, and you weren't allowed to have a book or a radio. The only thing you could have is a sandwich or two, with you. And you got 2 20-minute breaks a day, an 8-hour day, and one was a swim break and one was a bathroom break. And you had to stay awake and alert. But there was sometimes nobody out there. But what you watched for when it did get busy, and on the weekends it did get busy, what you're watching for is anything unusual, anything out of the ordinary. Because, when a Sunday comes along, you've got thousands of people out there, You can't watch every person, but you're looking for that which stands out, that looks a little bit unusual, and then that draws your attention immediately. That's how fear operates when it's awakened.
Yes.
It's just there, it's alert, it's present, it's calm, it's relaxed, but it's watching for anything that's just a little bit out of the ordinary, just something that, like a rock falling on you or a car coming at you.
Right.
and it helps you just, without going through the head, you just react.
Yes.
You respond to the situation without going through the brain, because the fear is owned and embodied and empowered.
Right, and so then it's completely natural. When it doesn't see anything it has to react to, it doesn't react, and it doesn't react to imaginary fears.
Exactly. It doesn't need to. It's like a cat ready to pounce, but it doesn't need to pounce when there's not a need to.
Right. And when it's done with the pouncing, the danger is past. I mean, it lays down, lays in the sun, it licks itself, and it purrs. I mean, there's just no holding on to that energy at all.
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
It's just absolutely back to that perfect state, just waiting for the next thing to happen. It's, I mean,
Yeah, that perfect state of equanimity. Yeah.
I'm just in awe of how brilliantly perfect it operates.
Yeah.
When I lose
So this
my
is such a
judgments about how everything is supposed to, when I realize that the way I think it's supposed to be is wrong, and I actually begin to look at the way things are, then I go, oh wow, it's working perfectly.
well, and I
So
think this
true.
is such a new concept for some of our listeners too. This whole idea that you're going to embrace your ego, because to your point, Genpo, we go to a lot of workshops that tell us we have to get rid of our ego,
Yes.
or right,
Oh, it's the
and
modern
so
devil.
Yes.
I mean, it's
Yes.
the ego made me
You
do
know,
it.
even in the Zen tradition, even my own teacher used to say, if I summarize what the teaching is, it's to be selfless or egoless. And I think what the big mind has done, and I think this is in credit to Western psychotherapy, frankly, that the ego is not to be gotten rid of. The ego is to be respected and honored for the work and job that it performs, and embraced and allowed to grow up, mature, and be a healthy, wise, and aware ego, rather than trying to get rid of it. You know, in 1994, I went through a practice where I really was still of that inclination that I had to get rid of my ego. And I did a Dzogchen, a Tibetan kind of practice, where I annihilated my ego. I mean, I destroyed it. I really destroyed it. And it was destroyed for several days and lasted for quite a long time, where it was, I feel, somewhat dysfunctional.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw, why did I ever want to get rid of my ego? Oh, that was nonsense. That's crazy. I just become dysfunctional. And I saw that you can have an experience of ego dropping away, you know, of forgetting the self or dropping the self. That's one thing. But to think that we should get rid of it, or that we can get rid of it for any length of time, because we absolutely need the ego to function in a functional way and in a healthy way.
It's an
So
absolutely
I think
critical
there's a
part.
lot of mistake out there about getting rid of the ego, or the ego being a bad guy. It's the way we know the ego in its immature form when it's in the basement, and how it comes out in covert ways that are the problem.
Yes.
Not the ego itself.
There were some times when I've worked with people who were seriously mentally ill. I mean, people are Section 8. You know, I mean, the only treatment they could get were the local authorities would show up once a day to make sure they took their meds. It just completely dysfunctional. And you know, I did my best to help these people. I'm not a medical professional like that. You know, but as just a compassionate human being, I'd talk to them. You know, I would just like hold conversations and answer questions about stuff. And the thing that was amazing, the insight that I had, was the reason they were in the situation of that is because they never did get the ability to stabilize with an ego. That was their problem. They were so lost as to who they might be, without having any kind of center for their nervous system to revolve around. They were just forever reacting to everything that came along. You take them into a store and they couldn't buy anything because they couldn't, 200 pairs of shoes, they couldn't narrow it down to 3 that they liked because they didn't know who they were. It was such an insight into how important the ego is when it's healthy and when it's aware, that it is to the functioning of the system. We just mistake it for the whole of who we are. Or we try to kill it and send it into the bathroom and pretend we don't have one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, that is just the most egotistical statement, and I myself have said it. You know, I have no ego. You know, because there is an experience that is beyond the ego. But now I see that experience, when we get attached to that experience, it's more like we reach egohood than Buddhahood, you know. There's an attachment to the ego, but the ego is so big and vast and wide, it has no boundaries. But it still has to be present, you know. It has to be present.
Yes. Without it, you really are totally in the unmanifest. There's nobody there.
Yes,
it is
exactly.
a key part of the functioning. It's like a piano without piano keys. I mean, it's part of the functioning, right?
Well, you can imagine hanging out there for a few days. I was like a puddle on the floor, literally. And the thing that saved me was I was in the middle of retreats in Europe, and there was a schedule. The schedule started, at 4:30 a.m. and so I just kind of have to pick myself up off the floor, literally, and do the entire schedule, teaching and everything. And then at 9:30 at night, when everybody was gone to bed, I'd lock my door and I'd go back into this practice, the Dzogchen practice, and stay up all night practicing. And again, end up as a puddle on the floor until I realized this is just not going to work.
I'm not going to be able to sustain this loss of cellular composure.
That is just such a powerful insight, and it really is revolutionary because I spent a long time trying to get rid of my ego. If it was possible, I would have. If it was possible to do, I would have done it. Eventually, I began to realize, wait a minute. I mean, if it's not going away, maybe you can't.
Right. Well, I spent from 71 to 94. That's quite a bit of time wanting to get rid of the ego. And I do feel that this, there is a coming together right now of East and West, and I feel it's really, really important work. And I think what the East offers is a lack of fear of dropping the ego.
Yes.
And what the West offers is that you can't live without it. And because I think together it's something more than avoiding letting go of the ego or losing the ego, if I'm making myself clear. In other words, if you look at it as a triangle, the left hand being a Western psychological or Western approach, the ego should be an aware ego, a conscious ego, a mature ego. On the Eastern, a lot of it is about letting go completely of the ego or losing the ego or dropping the self and entering into that absolute place. And there are gurus and teachers and masters that teach from that place and hang out in that place. And I did myself from 86 to 94. So, I know that happens. And how do we find that apex, that balance, where the ego has been let go of and yet is a healthy, mature, awakened ego, an aware ego? And that's a lot of what the work I'm trying to do right now. And then work on the shadows around the left-hand corner of the triangle, around the human side, the doing side, and then the shadow of the absolute, too.
Yes.
I'm going to jump in, guys. We actually have a question.
All righty. Let him.
Hello, caller.
Hi, this is Alessandra Gilberte.
Hi there, Alessandra. How are you?
Hi. I've been listening attentively. And I would like to ask you if you will please bring it down to earth, whatever you're saying.
I'd be happy to.
Thank you. I have a special case, and what it comes to my mind is it's very conflicting. I think about honor. I think about being authentic. I think about all those values that we are trying to achieve, or we want to raise ourselves up. Specifically, I fell in love with a man, and he happened to be married. And there's all these emotions from both sides. And I want to follow them, but I don't. There's a lot of repression because it's not appropriate. because I honor the vow of marriage, because it will make me a liar, because it will make me hide those feelings that I have. So what you're talking about is, see, that's my ego, right? Well, I want it, and I don't care. I will have it. But then there's the other part, the right of the triangle.
Right.
That he said, it's not the time. You can't just run with the emotions.
Right.
You see, it is a very difficult balance to just stay in the middle. Because you want to run. I just want to run away. I want to shove it. I want to hide it. I want to just kill it. But then there's the other part of me that says, stay. Stay and hold on.
My suggestion, because I think you've touched my heart in this dilemma, and I know this dilemma myself, and I think all of us do, to one degree or another. And if we just follow our heart and we ignore the karma or the consequences or the hurt and the lying and the deception and all that, we ignore that, we're gonna hurt. We're gonna hurt ourselves. We're gonna hurt the others. We're gonna hurt other people. We're gonna hurt the person's spouse. We're gonna hurt them, that person, and a whole family and everybody else. If we just ignore our heart and the love we feel, we also, it's not so easy. We hurt. We feel we miss an opportunity. We can't just ignore our heart. What I would suggest, and I don't have an answer, it's just a suggestion, and that is to talk to or talk from those two parts of yourself, whatever you want to call it. The one, your heart is yearning to be with this person that you've fallen in love with, and hear that one out, what that one wants, what that one's wishing for. And then go to the other side and talk to more of the rational, the one that is aware of consequences, of the problems, with just following the heart. And listen to that one. And don't think that there's a place in the middle that's right. Okay? You know, we talk about Buddhism, the middle way. The middle way is not a fine line between these two extremes. It's to embrace both these two. One you could call the mind that knows what is appropriate and what's right, and the heart which is just wants to go for it. And find a way from the apex where you can navigate with these two. And sometimes it might mean patience, and the patience to allow things to open up and things change. So there's this whole thing that everything is changing. These circumstances may change. This person may not be married forever. Something else may happen. All kinds of things. So sometimes the wisdom is just being patient and paying attention to both these voices. I'm going to call them voices or aspects of the self. But, you know, it's not an easy place to be, and my heart goes out to you, and I feel a lot of empathy for your problem.
I'd like to.
It's not really a problem.
If
it's a beautiful thing.
If I can just throw something. Both sides of this are innocent, Alessandra. You know, the mindset, the value side, the ethical side, the side that understands consequences, is harshly judging the other side, and there's really no need to. I mean, there's a part of all of us that is just pure desire. It doesn't care about consequences, doesn't care who gets hurt, it doesn't care about its carbon footprint. I want that. I want that Hummer. You know, I want that person. I don't really care about the consequences. That's a natural part of us too. I mean, if that's the only part that is there, you become, you become a tyrant or a sociopath or something, because there's different energies in us that help balance each other. But there's no need to be harsh on either side. And that's not actually in the chakra system. That desire isn't actually your ego. The ego is the third chakra. That desire is the second chakra. The ego is actually a different energy than that. And the heart, which is love, the pure love of it, which is forever innocent, is simply wanting to reach out and love. All of those energies are present at the same time. If you can honor each one of those and speak to each one of those, or speak from each one of those, as you do the way Genpo does, you really you get an intimacy with them that makes you more comfortable with them. And at that point, the wisdom as to know what to do in the moment can really come out and be heard, and all of the energies will agree with it, because all of them only want one thing, and that's whatever's best for you. And as that becomes clearer and clearer to you, that the conscious center of you becomes clearer and clearer as to what is the best for you, all that energy, they don't fight anymore. They actually align to give it to you. And as Genpo said, you know, this second is completely different than the second before. Things are always changing. You simply don't know where this energy is going to take you. And I always assume that if the energy is there, it's destined to take you somewhere really, really beautiful. You may not see it yet, but that's the nature of life. Does that help?
Yes, and I believe...
Does that help answer your question?
Yes. Yes, thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you for calling in.
Thank you so much for sharing that with you. That's really very touching.
It's quite a dilemma.
As she speaks from these 2 points of the triangle and moves from being disowned and disliked or villainized to being owned and appreciated and loved and valued, both sides, as she moves up the let's say the consciousness of to the apex, a lot of this will harmonize by itself and will find its own solution. And I love what you said, GP, and that is that, you know, it's really about not making one or the other wrong or villainizing it. It's really honoring these two. I mean, we all struggle with this.
Yeah. Hey everybody, this is G, and I am so happy to announce it has finally been released. The Just Allow It Mini Meditations mobile app for iPhone, iPad, and Android. I've teamed up with the brain entrainment audio technology expert, Don McCarty, and we have created an entirely new environment for creating meditation applications, meditation CDs, and meditation MP3 downloads. We're calling it Spirit Technology, and its intention is to provide you with the path of least resistance between you and a clear mind. As a matter of fact, we're starting a whole new organization together called Clear Mind Sound. So the new Just Allow It mini meditations give you a deeper meditation experience, make it easier for you to get into the meditative state and make those dramatic shifts in your life that you really, really want to make. But not only that, we've added environmental sounds. So you can choose to add in the sounds of birds chirping in the forest at night, of crickets and peeper frogs, of rainstorm and ocean waves, ambient sounds that you can choose and mix in yourself. And you can mix in the amount of voice, the amount of brain entrainment and music, the amount of ambience. You can all mix it together to your taste. So you can get the application by just going to our new website, clearmindsound.com, click on the products tab, and pick out the version of the mini meditations you like. The app, the CD, or the download. So visit clearmindsound.com to find out what we're up to, what I'm up to on all this new meditation technology that I'm going to be bringing to you, and get your copy of the Just Allow It mini meditations. Now back to the show.
It's just the conflict that we struggle with as human beings. It's what makes us human.
Yes, and that's what makes it interesting. No, really, that is what makes life so interesting and precious. Is because
then I should be very interested.
Yes. Well, I guess there are exceptions. No, the thing that was so liberating about the experience is that there isn't. It's not a balance point. The middle way, this point in the middle, is not a balance point. It's not this kind of this no man's land in between. It's this freedom of motion to move between them, so that they're all available. So whatever is the particular right mix of energy that's needed in this moment, you have access to it. It's like a painter with this beautiful palette, and you can paint anything. And the moment just kind of calls for the paint to happen. There's a beautiful quote from Nisargadatta Maharaj, one of my favorite teachers, and he says, "To know that you are nothing is wisdom. To know that you are love, or to know that you are everything is love. Between these two, my life flows."
Oh, that is beautiful.
Just exquisite. And that's really it. There's this constant motion. We're always looking for the place, that perspective that's right. I know that's what I spent my whole time doing. I always thought, the truth was a perspective, right? You'd have that big insight, the big breakthrough. Suddenly everything is clear, and you think it's a perspective now that you're supposed to hold on to. And it was that day with you, then suddenly that all just dissolved, and that there is no such truth. It is always the matter of this freedom to flow from one place to another, so that the moment creates the truth as it needs it, and what's the perfect truth for that moment, and then it fades, and then there's the next one. It's just this fluidness and this infinitude of life that is just stunning, and it's totally free.
Well, in Buddhism, we have the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. And, of course, the first of the Eightfold Path is right view or right understanding. And my understanding and a Mahayana understanding of Buddhism, Zen understanding, is no view is the right view, because every view is right as far as it can see from the perspective it has. It'd be like 100 people sitting in a room. Every person has a different view of that room. Every view is right. Every person sitting in there, their view is right, but no view is complete. No view is whole. So no view is the right view. They're all right, but there's no right view.
Right.
And so there is no right view. Or you can say all views are right view, as long as you don't hold on to any particular view.
Right. And that really is the cause of all suffering, when I'm holding doggedly on a particular view.
Exactly.
I mean, that's
That
it.
is the cause of.
That's it, in a nutshell. Right? And of course, if I'm holding on to it tight enough, I'm right and you're wrong, so I'm going to cause you suffering.
That's right. That's right.
Well, and that whole idea of judgment.
Yes, that's exactly the case.
That's where it comes from.
Yeah,
exactly. That my view is somehow better, more superior, right than yours, rather than realizing that your view is your view, my view is my view. They're both right and they're both incomplete, and there's no right view.
Yeah, and at the same time, you can't live without a view, right? So
we all have our views.
So right. You're forever moving through them with a certain amount of freedom. You're just not really attached to them. It's not the absence of views; it's the absence of an attachment to it. I'm so grateful to you,
Genpo. I really love what you said about, it's the moving, the flowing. If we call it that baseline, the flowing from one side to the other. We don't have to manifest. We don't have to manifest either one. What we have to do is embrace them both. In other words, from whether we talk about a heart view or perspective or a mind view or perspective, we don't have to just take one over the other. But the flow is what keeps us healthy. That's the whole thing. In fact, the word dukkha, as maybe everybody knows, dukkha is the word for suffering. Buddha said that life is dukkha, means we suffer in our life. But the word actually means a wheel, like if we had a cart and one of the wheels got a stick pulled into it, hit a branch or got a stick, and the cart just kept spinning around in circles, and it didn't move. It was rotating around and round and round, or stuck altogether. That's dukkha. Well, as long as we can pull out that stick and move the cart, then we're unstuck. That is sukha. That's liberation.
And it's interesting that the word chakra means the wheel.
Huh.
It's so beautiful. I mean, suffering is stuck. Period. If there's no stuck.
Right.
If there's no stuckness, there's no suffering. You're simply moving. Yeah, you're simply moving. Yeah, there's no reason to attach yourself to a particular body. You just did something in Europe, right?
When did I get back? About a week ago. And I was in Europe for, I think, 7 weeks, something like that.
Oh, wow.
I had a bunch of events, and I had 4 in Copenhagen alone, and then Vienna and Prague and Warsaw.
Wow. There's a real resurgence of interest in Zen over in Europe, isn't there?
I think so.
Yeah.
I really do. And maybe for me, I'm more accepted in Europe right now than I am here in the States.
Wow, you suffer the same fate that jazz musicians have.
Yeah. Yep.
America, the birthplace of jazz, doesn't want to hear it anymore. But they love it in Japan. They love it out in the East and in Europe. Yeah, there's quite a spiritual revival going on in Europe.
Yeah, there is.
So did you do any traditional Zen when you were over there, or was it all the big mind?
No, I did do a little traditional Zen at my old, with my old Sangha in Poland.
Mm.
My successor there in Poland is going through chemo right now.
Mm.
And she's a film star there. She's probably the biggest film star in Poland.
Wow.
And she's really suffering. So I went both this time and also in June when I was there, last June, to see her. And we did the traditional Teisho kind of talk and all that, and also a little big mind. But everything else was pretty much strictly big mind work. But,
wow.
I don't even make the distinction much anymore.
Yeah, I know you don't.
between big mind and Zen, and all that.
It's just a different way of teaching it.
Yeah, it's just a different upaya, different skillful means, really. And more and more, we're kind of combining the two anyways in our retreats. Doing some of the more traditional devotional practices. I'm kind of going 2 directions at once. The more traditional devotional practice, and then big mind is just an upaya technique for the world.
Right. No, because the other part, the devotional techniques. I mean, it's so necessary to have that sense of that religious sentiment, that sense of awe, the sense of wonder. There's just an absorption that happens just for the sheer mystery of it.
Right.
That spirit is still, it has to be much like, it really gets kind of lost in processes and techniques that get results oriented. I mean, it's a necessity for the West, which is why big mind is so brilliant. But there is something that can be lost in that if you don't.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You can throw the baby out with the bathwater. So I figure I just have to go both directions.
Yeah.
Have big mind, as a method for psychotherapy and growth and maturing in consciousness, or growth in consciousness, and big mind, or I'm calling it big heart Zen, as more practice and devotional practice with the lineage. If they're more interested in knowing more about the big mind work, they can go to bigmind.org. There's a lot of material out there by now, a lot of on YouTube and a lot of things like that.
Well, people are beginning to join us. I heard the voice of John. Here's John. Nice to you. John is one of my students. So, John, meet your grandfather.
How you doing, Grandpa?
Hi, John. Hi, John. I do feel like a grandfather. I mean,
We have one more question, one more caller, and we have just a few minutes to take it.
Okay.
So, hello, caller.
Hello.
Yellow.
What's your question this evening?
I have asked this of Greg, and I'd just like to hear your response on it. Talking about perspectives, and no perspective is right perspective. They're all right perspective. What about racism?
you know, I think that's a really interesting one. Do you realize that we all have a voice within us or an aspect within us that's a racist?
Absolutely.
And if it's disowned, then it comes out as racism. But if I can own my racism in me, you see, then I can come out by transcending that. And so it's not that the view is right or wrong. It is a stuck view when it's down in the basement. And it comes out then as racism, which, of course, there are views that when they're stuck and down in the basement, there are ways of being that, of course, are harmful and intolerable and so forth. What we want to do is look into ourselves and maybe ask to speak to the racist within me, and then if I say, yeah, I'm a racist, but he doesn't like owning me. He doesn't like acknowledging me. So then begin to move that up by saying, okay, well, how do you manifest when you're not acknowledged? Well, I go covert, and I come out in little conniving ways where maybe I'm doing this or I'm doing that. And then, okay, so what do you need? Well, I'd like for him to stop being a racist against me, stop hating me for being a racist, and start to own me. And as we do that, I think the way we manifest is going to be completely different than if the racist within me is down in the basement and suppressed.
I think
again, I lose at Stump the Guru.
I think what happens is that when it's suppressed like that, it becomes a position I have to hold on to, and it's really an excuse to try to make myself feel better. There's usually some kind of part of me that I'm really disowning thoroughly, and I'm trying to project it on somebody else.
Exactly, it's superior.
Yeah,
and
when it matures, what happens is it really acknowledges and loves and appreciates racial, ethnical, cultural differences, right? It doesn't try to make everybody the same. It doesn't try to make everybody homogenous. It doesn't try to turn every street corner into a shopping mart, a wall, right? It actually acknowledges these differences and loves them. Right, so you can remain different. You can maintain the character and flavor of your culture without having the position of this is my culture is better than your culture, and that's where it emerges. I think.
You just described really the first two of 3 points of koan study, and koans are these riddles that we do in Zen. And the first point is to see the oneness, that we're all one, we're all equal, that we're all interdependent on one another and interconnected to each other. It's like one body, one ocean, we're all one. The second part is to appreciate the differences, to appreciate that we're all uniquely different, that there's no two people identical, not even twins, not even identical twins are identical. We're all completely unique and already special, and appreciating the differences in whether it be race or whether it be cultures or whether it be nations or it be individuals or it be ideas or it be concepts, to appreciate these differences.
That's the point. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, caller.
You're welcome.
We appreciate
Thank
your
you.
question.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, we have just about a minute to wrap things up, guys. Genpo, any last words of wisdom for our callers.
You know, you say words of wisdom. I think the interesting thing is the latest wisdom I have is that I don't have much. I feel more and more as just an ordinary human being with all the same difficulties and problems that every other human being has, and it's so nice because there's so much more empathy and compassion and love when you feel the same pains and the same joys and the same things. Hanging out in the absolute is it's okay for a while. But,
it's kind of. But I wish you brought a magazine.
Yeah,
it's kind of boring.
But thank you very, very much, and the callers for calling in. I appreciated the calls and working, and spending this time with you and the listeners. I loved it. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking me again to be on the show. Thank you.
Thanks, Genpo.
Yeah, well, we hope to have you back. We hope that you'll come back and talk
My
to
pleasure.
us more. I know that we didn't get to cover everything tonight, so
Right,
look
there we
forward
go.
to having you back. There's never enough time to cover it all.
No, there never is.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you, everyone, for listening to the Law of Attraction 2.0 Spiritual Straight Talk this evening with our guest, Zen Master Genpo Roshi. Please join us next week. Our guest will be Beth Meisner, who will discuss how we are created in the image of God. And next week, we're going to be doing something a little new. We're going to spend the beginning of our show taking questions from our callers and listeners. So please email us ahead of time your questions to questions@LOA20.com. Again, that's questions@LOA20.com. Email your questions ahead of time, and we'll take some time at the beginning of next week's show to answer them for you. Genpo, thank you again for joining us this evening. And thank you to all of our listeners. Great. I can't wait to have you back. We hope you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving weekend, and we hope you'll join us next week for more Spiritual Straight Talk. Good night, everyone.